Assalamu alaikum. My name is Zai Rudder, and I am the Communications Coordinator for CAIR National, welcoming you on today for today's episode of CAIR on Air. I want to thank all our viewers today watching live and those listening from American Muslim 360. We're always grateful for your presence. Today's episode, we'll be talking about Imam Jamil Al Amin, a civil rights activist who's been serving a life sentence since March 2002. He's a man of great character and is noted for his role in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, a grassroots organization that fought for the voting rights against the Jim Crow segregation. He is a local legend, advocating relentlessly for the rights of Black Americans, as he is also a national figure in the struggle for Black civil rights in the 60s and 70s. During his life, he was targeted by racist and xenophobic government surveillance, and in March 2000, he was accused of killing a Fulton County sheriff's deputy and wounding another. His case ultimately took 2 years to come to trial, and in 2002, less than 6 months after 9/11, his case was fraught with allegations of suppressing evidence, and despite another suspect coming forward and confessing to murdering the deputy, Jamil was still convicted of the crime. Advocates across the nation claim that he is innocent, and there was recently a new push to release him from prison. So today, I want to welcome on two amazing guests who will be going over the case and talking about Jamil and his struggle. Thank you so much for coming on. Maha Al-Kwaleli, you can help me with the pronunciation, forgive me, and Azza Abu Youssef, Director of CAIR Arizona. Thank you so much for coming on. Maha, you're his attorney, that's correct?
Yeah, I am one of the attorneys on his legal team.
One of the attorneys, excellent.
Yeah, and you said my name correctly. So.
Okay, alhamdulillah. And Azza, you are the CAIR Director of CAIR Arizona. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me, Zai.
Alhamdulillah. Well, it's a pleasure to have you both on. I'm really grateful. So I first wanted to center our conversation on who this man is in a community sense. How does the community know him? Because fortunately, we know how the government may view him, but what is he like as a father and as a member of his community? So, Maha, can you talk to us a little bit about that and his efforts in Atlanta?
Yes, inshallah. So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala Rasulullah. Imam Jamil is a giant in our history, and it's unfortunate that this younger generation really doesn't know much about him. There's been a gag order where he hasn't really been able to tell his story. During the trial, there was an official gag order, a written gag order. But since the official gag order was lifted, this unofficial gag order where any historians, professors, anyone who wants to interview him has basically been denied. So he is being erased from history. And he's a critical part of African-American history and our history as a Muslim ummah in this country. Imam Jamil laid the foundation for the Black Lives Matter movement. He worked closely with Stokely Carmichael, was involved in SNCC, was part of the Black Panther Party. He met with President Lyndon Johnson regarding the Selma crisis in 1965. He is a giant in civil rights history, right up there with Dr. King and Malcolm. And he is a giant in our history as a Muslim community. He laid the foundation for all these national organizations. He established a huge community. He cleaned up the West End of Atlanta. He changes lives. This is a man who, when you speak to him, he changes lives. Even to the extent that the government tried to put a white supremacist in the cell next to him, in an effort to essentially to harm him in some way. And that white supremacist converted to Islam. So this is a man who, to me is an extremely humble servant of Allah. And he maintains that spirituality and that hope and that positivity. So essentially bringing him home would inspire so many young people.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I had no idea about the gag order, and that's maybe evidence of the unfortunate success, but this is why, we're so happy to have you here. And I think it's very important for Muslims to understand that his case is also crucial to our struggle, because Black Muslims have always been fighting for civil rights, and they have influenced the way that Muslims today advocate for civil rights post 9/11, and that's so important to our history. So I spoke a little bit about his case and some of the ways that he was targeted by the government, and we see that now to this day with the white supremacists in his cell. But why is this happening? I mean, is it part to do with his reach in the Black Power movement? Are there other insidious reasons beyond that?
Okay, so Imam Jamil, he was part of the Black Power movement, right? But essentially, when he took his Shahada, he kind of transitioned from the Black Power movement into human rights activism. So this is a man who heavily organized against the genocide of the Bosnians in the 90s. He was heavily involved in advocating for Palestine and the liberation of the Palestinian people. So he is a human rights activist, and he believed in advocating for anybody who is oppressed. So essentially, his case is an extension of J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO. And it's interesting to watch it now because we're starting to, as a nation, learn about COINTELPRO and J. Edgar Hoover and what was done through Judas and the Black Messiah, the Fred Hampton story, and the assassination of Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton was, the younger version of A. Trap Brown, who is Imam Jamil Al Amin, right? And we're learning about it. Like, there are definitely different movies that are coming out. So they just released, I watched it on an airplane actually, MLK at the FBI, and gave the story of COINTELPRO and the surveillance of Dr. King and how they brought down Dr. King. So any African American leader who had the power to inspire people and to influence systemic reform and change was targeted by J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO. So currently there is actually a bill introduced into Congress through Representative Bobby Rush to disclose those COINTELPRO documents and to get a better understanding of the extent of the surveillance and the unconstitutional surveillance of Black leaders or civil rights leaders in the history of this country, and to try to make those wrongs right. So this story is very right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting that you mentioned those things. I want to. I'm interested in two factors. I want to know, how is this issue of surveillance still impacting the community? Maybe Ozzy, you can speak about that. And I'm also interested in learning about the cases surrounding the course for retrial, and what does that mean for him? Did Azza or Maha want to speak on that?
In regards to the cases of surveillance, Zai, that's a lot of the work that CAIR does here, like nationally, is, making sure that the community is aware of, what the FBI surveillance, or like knowing their rights when it comes to the FBI and policing in the state. As far as it is in Atlanta, I'm not very sure, like what's been going on. I know, Maha, we had a conversation a few weeks ago about the FBI surveillance during Imam Jamil's activism.
Thank you. I don't know if Maha want to say something.
Yes. What was the second part of your question? I missed it. I'm sorry.
No worries. I want to know, can you talk to us a little bit about the current situation regarding his retrial, or what's the current push in for his case?
Okay. So just to piggyback on what Azza said, surveillance in this country is an ongoing concern. There are constitutional rights that we have as citizens of this nation. And those constitutional rights must be preserved for everyone, not just for Imam Jamil, not just for the Muslim community, but for the American population at large. So when you start to break these these rights down, these constitutional rights, and you violate those constitutional rights in surveillance, as has been happening, post 9/11, it's a danger to all of American citizens, to be honest with you. As far as this case is concerned, it's threefold. So again, this is a very active case, and it's really exciting to see the Muslim community kind of jump on now, because he's been incarcerated for now 21 years. This is a man who has been essentially tortured and medically neglected. He was in the Supermax in Colorado under the ground, doing like in isolation. Basically, his window was above him, and it's very disturbing what has happened to him. It's very disturbing that they have intentionally blinded him. In 2017, his medical records show that there were signs of glaucoma and that it needed to be ruled out. Otherwise, the blindness could have been permanent. They didn't properly test him. Since 2018, every ophthalmologist or optometrist that has seen him has stated that he needed cataract surgery. They ignored it. And time again, to the extent that when I got on the case, he was blind in one eye and then ultimately was blinded in both eyes, couldn't navigate the prison, was getting hurt, and couldn't read legal correspondence. We go weeks sometimes without hearing from him, wondering what has happened. It's disgusting. So there are multiple cases going on right now. Number one is that we filed a case in Tucson, asking that the federal government give him the cataract surgery that would restore his vision. So since the filing of that case, alhamdulillah, he had one surgery recently, I want to say last week or the week before, and he has his vision restored in one eye. So the second eye is pending at this time. But the bottom line is that they deprived him of that surgery. He has cancer. He's 77 years old. He's extremely medically fragile, and he's across the country where we can't really reach him.
Right.
So that's one lawsuit that's pending, is that we want him to get the proper medical treatment. The other lawsuit that's pending is it's not a lawsuit. The case has been reopened through the Fulton County Conviction Integrity Unit. And the Fulton County Conviction Integrity Unit has the power to do three things. They could either give him time served and release him, reduce the sentencing and release him, or they can issue a new trial, or the third thing they could do is completely exonerate him and let him free, which is obviously what we want. There's critical evidence in this case. The trial was disgusting. Okay. He wanted to testify at his trial, and he didn't testify because it's very common, for defense attorneys to tell their client, don't testify, exercise your Fifth Amendment right to silence. And he didn't testify. But the prosecuting attorney decided in closing argument to do a mock cross-examination. So what we have now is and that's a direct violation of his Fifth Amendment right. So what we have is a juror who gave a sworn statement stating that violation of the Fifth Amendment, where they did the mock cross-examination, ultimately led to his conviction. So that's one issue. The other issue is that his defense team wasn't allowed to cross-examine the FBI agent who was on this case. And there was evidence. He is the one who, quote unquote, found the weapons. Right. And it's questionable. This FBI agent had a history of prior misconduct and placing weapons at scenes. And there was one situation where he actually killed someone and placed a weapon, a fingerprintless weapon. And these were fingerprintless weapons that were found when Imam Jamil was picked up. So there are so many glitches in this case, to the extent that, let me read a quote from the appellate court. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeal acknowledged prosecutorial misconduct and specifically stated, we regret that we cannot provide Mr. Al Amin relief in the face of prosecutorial misconduct that occurred at his trial. The prosecutor's duty in a criminal proceeding is not to secure a conviction by any means, but to ensure that justice will prevail. The prosecutor at Al Amin's trial failed to live up to that duty. I mean, we have an appellate court saying this. So we want the Conviction Integrity Unit to do the right thing, and to go through all the evidence would take a lot of time. But the third option is, obviously after this, there have been some changes in the law, in the case law, and there is also another opportunity to revisit the appellate process. So a brief has been filed in Fulton County, but obviously the more expeditious way to do this would be to get his exoneration through the Conviction Integrity Unit. So there's been a change in the DA, which is a very big deal. And Fannie Willis is the one who reopened this case, and she is investigating it. It's an active investigation. So we're very hopeful, and what we need is to kind of keep our foot on the gas and not stop at just what's happening this weekend. But we need, as a nation, to demand and to consistently demand that he be released.
Wow, absolutely. The evidence presented in his favor is remarkable, and it's astounding still that that wasn't taken at the time of the case, and shows how harmful this discrimination really can be. I want to understand a little bit more about the protest that's happening. Am I correct, on the 15th of August? And how that is instrumental and also very important to show community support, to demonstrate that this man is an important asset to our communities.
Yeah, Zai, I can speak to that. Give Maha a little break. So on Sunday, we're going to be holding a press conference and a protest outside of the U.S. federal courthouse here in Tucson, to call for the federal government to not only provide the proper medical treatment for Imam Jamil, but also transfer the civil rights leader back to his custody in the state of Georgia, so he can be exonerated and free after nearly 20 years of being away from his family for a wrongful conviction. And I think it's really important to highlight that this protest is just a tiny way to honor Imam Jamil and all the work that he's done as a civil rights leader. And something I want to bring up, that so I am one of those Maha, like it's one of those cases that you know about but you don't hear about every single day. And after like planning this protest here in Arizona, I cannot believe the amount of support and the outpouring of love that has been given to this initiative that we're taking on Sunday. And it's quite been emotional because this man is as old as my father. So having this man in jail for 20 years, in prison for 20 years, like his family, it's enough. This protest, like, something needs to change. And inshallah, like, I'm very hopeful, Maha, like, after all the work that you've all been doing, for the last, however many years, I feel like it's paying off finally.
Yeah, inshallah. And may Allah give him strength. I mean, the challenges in prison is unbelievable. I want to understand a little bit, and you touched on this a little bit, Maha, but bring home to us and our viewers and what it really means to the community to have this man home, and maybe to touch on the others who joined the call with the protests and whatnot.
Yes, absolutely. So, Imam Jamil, well, let me backtrack a little, Zai, because I forgot a critical issue on the case, is that we have a confession by a third party. So if you go to what happened to the number 2 rap.com, you could see Otis Jackson confessing in another trial, and there's written confessions. This man has been consistently confessing to this crime that Imam Jamil is being held for 21 years, So we have, it's just a matter of them actually, there's evidence corroborating that confession. It's just a matter of them actually doing the work and releasing him. And of course, there's action items at freeimamjamil.com. For people who want to consistently look back, those action items are updated as the case progresses. Imam Jamil is symbolic of all of our leaders, and it's very scary to set an example of allowing them to take our leader and not advocating for him when there is a confession by a third party. We cannot abandon him, because in abandoning him, it shows that, we're driven by fear. And if you instill enough fear, when they take our leaders, we won't fight for them. Imam Jamil, like I said, laid our foundation. To bring him home, will give relief to this family that has been deprived of him for so long. The emotional stress on this family is astronomical. So that's, to me, number one. Number two, he's been robbed of 21 years of his life and tortured. Like, let him live in peace for the remaining years. So, and he is influential. Any issue that we have as a community, he will be the first to defend anyone who is oppressed. So he's an influential leader. He knows systemic reform. He understands how to make change. So he's a critical part of who we are as a community. It's right now our demand at this press conference is threefold. Number one is that we want him to get the surgery that he should have gotten 3-4 years ago. Number two, we're asking that he be transferred to Georgia. And if he can't be released from federal custody, because what you have is a state prisoner being held by the federal government, which is very uncommon. I don't know that I know others, but this is not a normal thing to happen. So he needs to be transferred to Atlanta, whether that's a federal prison or back into state custody. And he needs to be able to interact with his counsel, to have closer ties with his family. He's thousands upon thousands of miles away from them. These could arguably be his final days. And lastly, of course, we're calling for Fulton County to properly look into Otis Jackson's confession, to look into the fact that, Bernadette Davy, who was the forensics expert on this case in the prosecution, she was ultimately fired for faulty ballistics on several cases. So there are so many holes in this case. This is an injustice. So we're really asking them to do what's right and to expedite his release.
Right. Well, thank you for this, Maha. You outlaid the case in such a beautiful way, in a way that's easy for us to understand. This man has gone through torment upon torment, and the state has done a lot to make this unknown to us. And his legend as a civil rights activist is so important to us now. I want to thank you both for coming on. It's been wonderful to hear. I want to ask if there's any other comments that we missed or a question I didn't ask that you'd like to point out now. We've posted most of the links in the chat for our viewers, and to join the petition and to join the protest. Like we said, it's important for us to demonstrate our support. With that being said, Maha and Azad, thank you so much. It's been excellent to have you on. Please, if there's any other way that we can support you in this cause, we would love to.
Thank you so much for having us, Zai. And thank you, Maha, for everything.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And I wanted to thank the organizations that are supporting us. This is honestly the first time that we see this outcry, and thank you, Azza, for facilitating it. And for USCMO advocating for Imam Jamil and all of the other national organizations. There's so many, I can't name them here, but we're really, really thankful for everybody's involvement and for the push at this time. So thank you for having us.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I will have a great rest of your day. It was excellent to meet both of them. And may Allah bless Jamil Al Amin infinitely and make it easy for him. And may he also bless his community and grant his community success. Thank you all to our viewers watching live with us and watching after. We'll see you next week on Tuesday at 3 p.m. Assalamu alaikum.